We get so many letters from around the world, so many stories from Australia, from Europe, from France, from England, from South Africa. All telling the same thing. Colin, did you see these episodes of black mob violence, black on white criminality in places where they never had them before? Yeah, I see them. And we're really indebted to people like Ilana Mercer, whose great book, Out of the Cannibal's Pot, and Kent Brakey for his new book, Never, Never, Never Again. We're really indebted to these guys for showing us what's going on in South Africa, how white people are targets of murder, violence on ridiculous levels every day. You know, if there was a way in this country, one of us could flick a switch and turn off this enormous level of black on white violence in all those countries I just mentioned and a lot more. Well, I know all of us would do it, but we can't. And what we can do to help them is it's actually kind of limited. And if they can't do it for themselves, it's going to be hard for us to help them do it. But just because we can't help them, that doesn't mean they can't help us. With people like Ilana Mercer and Kent Brakey, what they're doing by writing these books about South Africa, they're telling us what happens to a country, what happens to white people when the world turns its back on white genocide that is happening in South Africa right now. So the world is telling South Africa, we do not care what happens in your country, because whatever happens to you white people in South Africa, you deserve it. But you just deserve it for being white. Not because you did anything in particular, but just for being white. We're going to take your land, we're going to murder your farmers, and we're going to basically drive you into incredibly difficult places in this country. And then 10 years from now, we're all going to wonder why the country is the worst shithole. Oh, did I say that? Sorry about that. Jogger, don't ban me. In the world. I mean, do we really need to be reminded of that? If so, there were a couple of good reminders this week. There's one out of the parliament in South Africa, where the head of one of the parliamentary leaders is talking about new law to steal property from white people, take their land without giving it to them, expropriation. He's trying to put a happy face on it, but he's kind of saying, well, we're going to take your land, but we're going to do it in the nicest possible way, unless, of course, you decide to fight back.
On Tuesday, South Africans, through their publicly elected representatives in Parliament, voted overwhelmingly in support of a motion to accelerate equitable land redistribution through expropriation of land without compensation. Some have become very hopeful, some have become very fearful. It is a question that we will continue to handle with care and with responsibility as the government. There will be no smash and grab of land in our country. That we will not allow.
And here's a weird story also out of South Africa. It just happened. It's happening right now. There's a head of the African National Congress, parentheses, those are the communists, those are the hardcore communists of South Africa. Winnie Mandela, those are the people that put tires, they do the necklace, they put the tire around your neck, set it on fire. Yay, they scream revolution. Well, their theme song, their national anthem for the last 90 years is a song called Kill the Boer, which is translated Kill the White Man. And they sing that all the time. Nelson Mandela sings that. Well, when he was alive, he was singing that with his fist raised in the air. Not too long ago, the great Willie Shields, the New Jersey talk show host and friend of this channel, he was on the air and he was talking with somebody who was telling him about the great Nelson Mandela and how he was a great this, great that, great this. He was Jesus Christ come back to earth. And Willie reminded this young lady of all the things that Nelson Mandela did. All the things he supported. I mean, not just while he was a revolutionary, not when he was in prison, but when he was out. Including sticking his hand up and doing the death to white people thing. The woman started crying on the air. She said Willie made her cry for telling the truth. So if you got kind of a crying thing going on about the truth, get your tissues out, because we're going to hear a little story here from South Africa. And I love doing podcasts because there's some great audio out there, and a lot of people have a lot more time for podcasts to go a little bit more in depth. But what you're not going to see here is when the fellas in South Africa are chanting this song in their native language, they are talking about killing white people. They are holding up signs about violence. But when they're singing the songs, they're holding their fingers out and mimicking the sounds and action of firing automatic weapons. That's the only thing I wish you guys could see.
Crowds of supporters are rallying behind ANC Youth League President Julius Malema as he stands trial on a charge of hate speech brought by the civil rights group AfriForum over his singing of a struggle song containing the lyrics "Kill the Boer." Youth League members from as far as Limpopo have been bused to Johannesburg to support their leader outside the South Gauteng High Court.
Maybe Johannesburg doesn't know that we are here to support Julius Malema 100% from Limpopo.
We as the Youth League of Limpopo, we came here in this court to support Julius Malema because we don't see that Julius Malema is guilty on the charges that are trying to make against him.
The song has been there for a long time before our president can be born, and then we cannot ban the song because of other people. Because this song is our old strangle song.
What about the white people when they were calling us black kephas? That is not painful, it's painful. What goes around comes around. They must understand. We are coming from far away with this song. If they want to ask why we are singing this song, I think they have to ask Albert Lituli, Chris Hani, Joe Slovo, Mandela. They've been singing this song long time. Why today is a big issue?
We cannot afford to allow these white people to charge our president for singing a revolutionary song which has been sung for the past 90 years. As we are speaking now, as we are standing here today, the ANC is about to reach 100 years. And the ANC Youth League is almost 66 years. Then how many leaders has been charged before President Julius Malema?
Viva your culture and your history, viva! Viva! I would like to apologize as a white man standing in front of all of you in Africa in your hands. I would like to apologize for being white in this context. It is your right, and this song does not intimidate me. It does not make me feel that you are free.
A charismatic Malema addressed the crowds at the end of his third day in court on Wednesday, 13th of April. He spoke confidently, saying that they should continue to sing ANC struggle songs. He later sang the controversial song to ecstatic crowds, but changed the lyrics from "Kill the Boer" to "Kiss the Boer."
Shoot to kill, kill our, kiss the Boer, the farmer, kiss the Boer, the farmer, brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa. Attention, we must be focused, we must defend the song, we are going to win because we are children of winners, like Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Therefore, we must never be demoralized. We are going to fight until these songs are protected and we can sing them freely. That is what we fought for. Comrade Winnie has remained a friend, a mother of the ANC Youth League. And we are proud of her because she's not ashamed, unlike others, to associate with this revolution. the revolution to defend the legacy, the heritage, the history of the people of South Africa.
Time will come when we will remind everybody who we are, and that nobody is going to push around with us.
Comrades, let's all respect the court proceedings, and as we march here outside, demonstrate, protest in support of our song, we must be disciplined. We must not give these Mickey Mouses outside a reason to speak bad about us.
For the most part, his enthused supporters kept order outside the court, singing on and off throughout the day and sporting pro-Malema posters. However, some would have done better to heed Malema's instructions, supposedly finding it difficult to remember that they are on the same side.
I failed to charge Peter Mukaba. You're not supposed to comment to the media. And I spoke to you earlier. You wanted to comment. You are starting again, comrade. You're out of order. Order, comrade. You're not a spokesman. You are not a leader in the ANC. Who are you? You are not a professional. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Don't come here.
The case, now into its fourth day, continues.
Again, this podcast isn't about South Africa. This podcast is what happens to a country when white people are declared evil. Not for doing anything, just for being white. Oh, Colin, you don't know your history. You don't know your history of 4,000, 4 million, 40 million, 4 billion years of well, you know, Colin, what do we call it these days? Oppression. And so, Colin, you know, in order to make an omelet, we got to break a few eggs, right? So if a few white people get hurt in South Africa, why do you care? You didn't care when the black people were being hurt down there, Colin. Well, I cared as much as anybody. Hell, you know, when South Africa was at the height of apartheid, black people were still moving into South Africa. Munch on that for a while. But now the country's a wreck. The white people are being targeted. You know, the word genocide is one of those words that people toss around. When we hear it tossed around, we think it's like probably used too much. Well, it turns out the meaning of the word genocide is very broad. I mean, if you have some kind of campaign, if you have some systematically keeping somebody down, that's genocide, let alone the murder and the violence kind of stuff. So that's what's happening in South Africa now. White people are being targeted just because they're white people. Nobody gives a damn. Well, the people in South Africa give a damn. They like it. They think it's cool. Papers here like Newsweek, New York Times, they're just shrugging their shoulders going, oh, you know, whatever. This is like the 1930s when Walter Duranty was a reporter in the Soviet Union for the New York Times. He won a Pulitzer Prize for traveling around Russia, the Soviet Union, and telling the readers of the New York Times how great everything was happening there. He was down with the cause of international communism, and he thought, well, I can't go around telling people there's 20 million people starving in the Ukraine because, well, that might hurt the cause. He literally said that stuff. They literally gave him the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer Prize for that. Today, he is known as probably the greatest villain in the history of journalism for actively lying about large-scale violence, death, and genocide in the Soviet Union under Stalin. And now the same kind of reporters are doing the same kind of thing in South Africa. But remember, this podcast isn't about South Africa. And the message of South Africa from Alana Mercer and Kent Brakey is, well, look what's happening there and look how it's happening here. I mean, look at all the college campuses. Do you really need me to play clips how on hundreds and hundreds of major college campuses there are courses about how the evil of white people, white privilege, that's a staple in academic life now. That white racism is such a wide-ranging, it's got its tentacles into everything, even if you're not the one out there going, yes, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan and I would like to kill everybody. No, even if you're not one of those people, you're guilty, just as guilty as that guy, because you're benefiting from a system of white privilege. And so I'm not going to get too upset when you become the victim of epidemic levels of black on white crime and violence because, well, let's face it, you deserved it. And see, the hostility has to precede the violence, right? When we see people getting, punched in the face, we see people getting robbed and beaten to a level far surpassing what is required to accomplish the goal of relieving somebody of their wallet, their cell phone, their ring, their car. There's hostility there. There's hatred there. I mean, how many examples do we need of that? How many examples do we need on college campuses of editors going, well, we're going to have a magazine only for white people? I mean, this is a staple now. It's a staple, and people, they don't think if it's good or bad. They just think, well, that's the way it is now in this country. And to see these examples of just so casual people vilifying white people for crimes they did not commit. They're just vilifying them just kind of for general reasons, like Oprah Winfrey. White people, there's a whole generation that are marinated in this racism, and they just have to die. See, don't I do a better version of that than Oprah? So when we talk about black on white violence, we really have to, at some point, we have to remind people there's a black on white, there's an anti-white hostility going on. And sometimes some of the brothers from south of the border get in on the act too, because they see that the pickings are good for anti-white hostility. So they're getting in on it too. And there's no better place to get in on the anti-white hostility than gentrification. This is a thing all over the country. There's a major problem in the top 100 cities in this country. We have a major problem in every one of those cities, and that is the white people are coming. The white people are coming. What did they do? Well, nothing yet, but they're going to do something because they're white. I mean, when I think of gentrification and black on white hostility, the first person I think of is Spike Lee. He famously gave a speech we covered in White Girl Bleed a lot and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. He famously gave a speech in response to a question at the YMCA in New York. Some kind of literary, cultural thing up there where Spike was sitting on the stage taking questions. Somebody stood up, some black guy stood up and asked him a question about his neighborhood, how it's getting nice, how he likes it getting nice. And, maybe there were a few white people in the mix. Good Lord, Spike Lee lost it. Lots of F-bombs, lots of W-bombs. White people. He started talking about gentrification, how much it sucks that white people are moving into black neighborhoods. Now, the black people didn't build the neighborhoods. They just moved into the neighborhoods. They moved into the neighborhoods, and let's just be as plain as we can about this. When they moved into the neighborhoods in the Bronx and Brooklyn, the initial effects were not something you'd put into an urban studies book as a model of progress. No, they ruined neighborhoods all over the country. Capiche? Then they turned around and blamed it on white flight. Yes, black people move into a neighborhood, all of a sudden, crime comes with it, violence comes with it, mayhem comes with it, excuses come with it. White people with families, Asian people with families saying, I'm not going to subject my family to this. And they get the hell out of there, and it's their fault. And the black people stay behind saying, we don't have the resources to build our community. Well, that was the story for 50 years. It was the story this week in the Chicago papers about something called the Kerner Report. So after the riots of the 60s, LBJ commissioned the Kerner Report. I forget who Kerner was. He may have been a senator. Anyway, he produced this big report saying, the reason there's so much black dysfunction, crime, violence, lack of education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why black dysfunction is off the scale in just about everything you can measure is because of white racism. So we got to fix that. So black people do not have any responsibility for anything that happens in their own lives because white people are always messing with them for no reason whatsoever. Okay. And the story in the Chicago paper, after 50 years, it said, well, after 50 years, nothing's really changed. Nothing's changed after 50 years. That is the number one preoccupation in the entire country. What the hell's up with black people and how can we fix them? I'm not saying that's the proper way to look at it, but that's how everybody looks at it and talks about it. How can we fix black people? Colin, you don't have a solution to fix black people. Colin, what's your magic bullet? How come you don't have a plan for incentivizing the urban areas, Colin? Colin, why don't you talk like those other people? You're always saying black neighborhoods. Aren't they really just urban neighborhoods, Colin? So the reason we've been talking about this the same way for 50 years is because everything they do either doesn't work or more likely makes it worse. I mean, every single major city in the country has been dealing with this unsuccessfully. Everybody gets elected on doing something, and what happens? Nothing. I mean, Jerry Brown, when he was governor of California, he left governor of California to become mayor of Oakland. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to turn Oakland into another little laboratory of liberal solutions for all these problems. And then did Oakland get better? Is Oakland a good place to live? Is it better today than it was 50 years ago? Anybody who says yes, they don't know anything about Oakland, the working class, proud working class town that was 50 years ago. Now it's a dark and dangerous chocolate city. Everybody up there knows it. Spike Lee knows it. I mean, every paper in the country, the San Francisco Examiner, LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times, New York Post, everyone in between, they've all they do their gentrification stories once a year. They go into the ghetto. They find a black person in a grocery store. They go, hey, what do you think about all the white people moving in here with coffee shops? And the answer is always, well, my grandmother came here in 1937 and she didn't have any coffee shops, so I don't think we need them today. I mean, that's like a direct quote from the Oakland gentrification story. And so for 50 years, we've been saying, Colin, we got to improve the inner city. Why don't you know that? Colin, why don't you have a plan for incentivizing and bringing jobs to the fellas in the inner city? Well, it turns out that doing all those things, for a long time, that was the solution. Today, it's the problem. Today, white people moving into the inner city with a little crazy little thing called jobs, that is the problem. And it's these things are kind of spiking all over the country. Just because Obama's not in office, he set a lot of things in motion that are still rolling down the hill. I don't know where the bottom of the hill is, but he set them rolling down the hill, and they're still rolling. And one of these things is this thing with gentrification. I mean, good Lord, how can we have white people move into a black neighborhood? We know white people really suck because they're always messing with black people. They're always coming into a place and they're trying to make it nice. No. No, they shall not overcome. Why don't we listen to some audio from a anti-gentrification rally out in Los Angeles, California. This is a lot of Hispanics in this gang. So the Hispanics move into LA, the Boyle Heights. That's like one of the most crime-infested neighborhoods of Los Angeles with the Batos. And they all decided that somehow now they're claiming that and they're all going to fix that up. They're going to make it a lot better. They're going to get rid of all the crime, make it like a Hispanic version of Wakanda. And no white people need apply. So they're protesting against this poor fool who somebody convinced him, yes, you could open a coffee shop. I think it's, what's it called? Well, we'll hear what it's called in a minute. You could open a coffee shop in the barrio, near the barrio. And you know what? Maybe even some people will move in. And if you do that, you have just committed the worst mortal sin of all. Gentrification. Let's hear a little bit of that protest.
Gentrifiers get the
What we don't see on the last protests is everybody's in front of the coffee shop. They're banging on the door. They're threatening the guy. The young ladies who work at the coffee shop are hurriedly bringing in the furniture from the sidewalk. They're closing the door. All of a sudden, the guy wearing kind of a newsboy cap that I wear from here on this channel from time to time, he goes outside. And there are cops there, but there's a lot of people, very angry people, angry with him for being white and moving into his neighborhood and refurbishing a storefront. Good Lord, we don't even need a trial for that. Let's hang him, then we'll give him a trial. He just goes out. He just stood there, put his hands together in that Indian, kind of Indian from India prayer sign. He just stood there kind of reminding people that he's kind of a gentle soul. He didn't get a chance to remind them that that he's down with the cause, so he doesn't understand why the cause is not down with him. Nobody wanted to hear it. They just looked at him and dropped F-bombs, and they told him to get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. They had an exact same thing the other night in Philadelphia. Not quite as intense, but this was purely a black thing in Philly, in North Philadelphia, one of the most dangerous, dark, and dangerous chocolate neighborhoods in America. This is the neighborhood around Temple University, North Philadelphia. Oh, by the way, if you're ever in Philadelphia, you're near the train station, you want to walk around and check out the sites. And if you see a sign that says Temple University 1 mile from where you are, you're in the wrong place. What you got to do is turn around, go back where you came from, and look for a taxi, call a Uber, call a Lyft. Get the hell out of there. They're not down with the white people in that neighborhood. So, and it's funny because Temple University, that's a center of critical race theory. That's a center of students and professors who will tell you until the cows come home that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. And Colin's making all that crap up about crime in Philadelphia because white people do it too, or white people deserve it, or it's not happening. That's how they roll at Temple. They go out and recruit professors like that. They have a publishing house at Temple. That's their main contribution to the planet. They publish books about critical race theory, white racism, black victimization. Of course, these same professors, they're never around when there is a really nasty case of black on white violence on Temple University. The same I almost called them preachers, the same professors who are out there explaining to us about this black victimization, they're never around when, for example, a few months ago, hundreds of black people rampaged through Temple University, put 6 people in the hospital, including a couple of girls, all on video, just because they could. I mean, the first thing you learn at Temple when you go to Temple is that you can't step foot off of campus. You're not welcome there. White people aren't welcome off campus at Temple. And so the university wants to build a football stadium. Temple University wants a football stadium. Okay, whatever. They want to join the ranks of the non-professional professional teams, I guess. Okay, whatever. I don't care. It's their property. It's their students. It's their thing. The black people in the neighborhood are very explicit. They don't want white people moving into their neighborhoods. This is not something that happened overnight. They've been complaining about Temple for years, about the white people are moving in. The campus is growing. Temple is one of the less expensive universities in the area, especially for things like law school. People go there. They want to live nearby. They buy a house. They rent a house. They fix it up. It's amazing how many of those people are victims of really nasty bits of black crime and violence, because if you let your guard down, if you decide, yeah, you can, you've been in Temple for 2 years, nothing's ever happened to you, you can go to that dry cleaner and maybe, you know what, it's 5 o'clock. Hey, I haven't been to that restaurant. I'll go over there and get me some barbecue ribs. This is Temple. I've been here for 2 years. Nothing's ever happened to me. I don't know what that crazy dude Colin Flaherty is always talking about.
Tonight, opponents of a proposed Temple University stadium hosted a town hall meeting to express their concerns about that plan. Dozens gathered at Carver High School of Engineering and Science in North Philadelphia. They say they're worried the proposed construction of a new 35,000-seat multi-purpose stadium near Temple's campus will have a negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood.
So you go out of the comfort zone, you go into the no-go zone confidently knowing you're down with the cause, so the cause is going to be down with you. No, that's a mistake. A lot of people have found that out the hard way. Anyway, at Temple, lots and lots of people are rallying against the university just because they don't want more white people. The next night at Temple, so they had this rally we just heard about. Then a couple of days later, they had not a rally, but a meeting at Temple where they were going to tell people what they wanted to do. They had to close the meeting because all the fellas and their lovely ladies stood up and started shouting at the president of Temple University. Now, I don't really care. To me, this is kind of like the Iran-Iraq war. I think it was Henry Kissinger who said, can they both lose? So you build a university, you take pride in teaching racial resentment, racial hostility, then you get out there and think you're somehow exempt from the kind of fire you started. Wow, why don't these black people like white people? I wonder why. Where could they be learning that? Any college professors at Temple like that? Any college professors teaching that in class? Yeah, lots of them. How about the students? Oh yeah, the students, the Temple students, they admit, they're in there too. They're in there reminding the neighborhood. The black and white students, they're part of this effort too. They're in there reminding the people in the neighborhood what a bunch of racist pigs are running Temple University. The ones that want to be down with the cause. Oh, here's a great story out of Portland. This is just a couple days ago in Portland. I'll read you the first paragraph. 2 years ago, Diane Causey's landlord died and her rental house in Portland, Oregon went up for sale. She was forced to move from the city's historically black neighborhood where she lived since 1978 into an apartment further east, nearly an hour away by public transit. The apartment was way out in the boondocks. I was miserable. But in December, Causey, 66 years old, was able to return to North Portland when she bought her first home through the Portland Housing Bureau's preference policy, or right to return, as it's been called, the first of its kind in the U.S. The right to return is, if you're a black person, you live there, the city of Portland will give you a bunch of money to go back there and buy your own house. They're calling it de-gentrifying. It's a thing. It's a thing all over the country now. And nobody's hiding what it is. Nobody's hiding like who it's aimed at. Nobody's hiding the racial preferences. And they just go on and on and on and on and on. Nobody's hiding it. Here we go. Sue Popkin. You know what? I think her husband was one of my college teachers. Maybe that's her kid. Anyway, a senior fellow at the Urban Institute in Washington says policies like those are attempt to retain or bring back communities of color that the city once marginalized. There's a lot of concern about what's happening to Portland in a way that is similar to San Francisco, and a grave concern is losing the historic minority populations all together. And they go into this long history of how white people black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism in Portland for a very, 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 very long time, probably like 4 million years. And it's so bad up there, for some reason, black people just kept moving in and staying. I cannot explain that. I did a video on gentrification last year. And it has stories from New Orleans, it has stories from a couple other places, but my absolute favorite story on gentrification, you're going to hear in a minute, comes from a guy, a New York City councilman. He's wearing a man bun on video, and he's talking about he knew his neighborhood was in trouble when he saw white people pushing baby strollers in his neighborhood in Harlem. To arms. The white people are coming. Black on white racial hostility is now acceptable, easy to find, mainstream. Let's look at a couple recent cases starting in New Orleans. Now in New Orleans, a church, a white church they call it, wants to build a community center in the middle of a black neighborhood. So so because of that, because of the zoning laws down there, you got to go knock on the people's doors and say, hey, we want to build a little thing in your neighborhood here, or expand this little building to build a community center. The black people were slamming the doors in their faces, cussing them out, threatening them, all because they were white and the neighborhood was black, and everybody was, nobody was hiding what was going on. When they got to the planning commission meeting, everybody was saying, no, we don't want them because they don't look like us. Signs were going up, no, they're white. We don't want white people in our neighborhood in New Orleans. And everybody just shrugs their shoulder and goes, okay, well, let's talk about it. Exactly how awful are white people coming into your neighborhood? That's a perfectly reasonable thing that we can all have a nice dialogue about. That's how crazy it is down in New Orleans. Here's another story along the same lines out of Brooklyn, except this one's directed at Asian people. So we've got the black city councilwoman, her name's Kumbo, out of Brooklyn, objecting that Asian people are starting to move into public housing projects in her neighborhood because, well, everybody knows those are for black people. We don't want Asian people in there. I've got nothing against Asian people, she assures us. It's just that, well, she's got something against Asian people. That's why she doesn't want them there. Does that name sound familiar? This Lori Kumbo? It was about a year ago, right after she was elected to the New York City Council to represent this area of Brooklyn, where there was a bunch of black on Jewish violence in the Williamsburg area. And so it was her job to come and explain it all. Why it wasn't really racial in nature. It wasn't a problem that everybody doing the beating were black, everybody getting the beating was Jewish. That had nothing to do with anything. The problem was black people did not understand why Jewish people did not want to share their success, and that explained the beatings. We get into that a lot, this whole topic of black on Jewish violence and don't make the black kids angry. There's a lot of it going on. In addition to this black on non-black hostility that exists in Brooklyn. Here's another story from Brooklyn involving another member of the city council, another black member of the city council, where they had a big forum. I think it was broadcast on one of the local educational channels, and it got around. The big forum where everybody wanted to talk about the big problem in their neighborhoods. The white people are coming.
Some of us who are long-term residents have a distaste for gentrification based on some of the new comments that we're hearing. Just from an anecdotal standpoint, I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for that point. So how do you know that your neighborhood's being gentrified?
I'll tell you what some of my students at Brooklyn College say. When I walk out on the street and I see a white man jogging, right? That was one thing that a student said, and it might not be fair or typical, but that's one way. Or for example, and this I heard from a student who lives in Bed-Stuy. I walked out the door and I heard people speaking French, and they weren't Haitians. So,
And for some of us long-term residents, when we see white people with a baby in a stroller,
You know, that's got to be my favorite comment for many, many months on this channel. Here you have these kind of liberal, I'll even say naive white people moving their child into a high crime neighborhood in Brooklyn. And the word goes out. Now we got a problem in this neighborhood. White people with babies are walking through our neighborhood, going to our shops. Think about what it takes to get your mind around that, to say something like that, to feel hostility to a young couple with a child who moved into your neighborhood. When did that become the problem? Didn't that used to be a good thing? Now it's a sign your neighborhood is decaying? Let's chalk this one up as the craziest statement we've heard any public official say, well, until somebody else tops it, which is always really, really quickly.
Hey, we might as well head up to San Francisco to get a little bit coast to coast feel. White people moving into black neighborhoods in San Francisco is the worst thing that could happen to anybody. Why? What do white people do? Oh, they come in, they buy crap. They put in nice restaurants. They fix things up. They don't litter all over the damn place. They don't throw rocks through people's windows. They don't clunk people over the head. I don't know why white people would move into a black neighborhood. I don't know why you would do that. But they do, and they're improving it. There's no question of. And in San Francisco recently, they decided, well, that's just about the worst thing that could happen to them.
More than 100 demonstrators took to the streets of San Francisco and stormed City Hall. Their message, save the Mission District from gentrification. NBC Barry's Christy Smith was there as the group tried to deliver their message to the new interim mayor.
Demonstrators marched down Mission Street, voicing their opposition to what they say are condo developments for the wealthy and highlighting affordable shops they've lost.
And we don't want Mission Street to become another Valencia Street, where you have high-end restaurants.
Under United to Save the Mission, they want San Francisco city leaders to provide protections for small businesses, establish a cultural corridor, and affordable housing.
The studios right now in the Mission cost $3,000. You know, families cannot afford to live here when you're making minimum wage.
They took their message to City Hall outside the mayor's office. Carolina Morales, a legislative aide for Supervisor Hillary Ronen, says these are some issues they've been working on.
We've been introducing some what we call interim controls, which are some policies that help create some legal protections to make sure that there are diversity of businesses.
She says they're working on ensuring that incoming projects have the highest level of affordable housing. Demonstrators say the issues are complex and they will keep coming back.
So there's an array of issues happening on Mission Street.
Now, that legislative aide we spoke with said this is really an important issue to them, and they've been trying to tackle it in a number of different ways, including taking another look at programs in the Mission that aim to help low-income people with housing that appear to still be underutilized.
Why don't we head out to Denver? Same thing. The reason we're doing this magical mystery tour is, again, the major challenge of this podcast and my videos and my books is we really have to show people we're not cherry picking, we're really connecting dots, and there's a lot of dots. So why don't we go out to Denver, where a guy has a coffee shop. It's always about coffee shops, right? Guy has a coffee shop, goes to Denver. He makes it kind of a big deal. This is a part of a chain, just a hippie, yuppie chain, and you roast the beans inside this place. They have an advertising agency. It's called Inc., I-N-K, exclamation point. And some person in the ad agency put a little sign on the front door, supposed to be a funny sign, saying something like, happily gentrifying the neighborhood since 2014. People, black people and people of color up there went crazy because, not only are white people moving into that neighborhood, boy, they're actually bragging about making it better. No. That was an injustice up with which they will not put.
You know, Tom, we don't have that answer, but it's a big question a lot of people have. I mean, we've seen several people walk up to this door over behind me and try to open it, clearly without any success. And they were confused by that sign you mentioned that said they'd be closed for the holiday weekend and, quote, "We'll see you on Monday." So we reached out to the store's owner a few different times to ask about the sign still being up, and he never answered. But clearly, as you can see, the sign has since been removed since we made our calls. Not everyone, though, who tried to open the door was they're actually going to buy coffee. There were a few people who wanted to see if their protests this weekend and this morning actually worked to keep the store closed. A few people we spoke with say they call it a victory for their anti-gentrification cause, including Tay Anderson, who's been helping to organize different efforts.
I think it was a testament to say that they understand and they've heard community voice about us not being happy with this establishment continuously being open, nor are we happy with the sign that they put up. And so I claim it as a victory for this community to say we were able to keep them closed one more day, and let's see if we can keep it up tomorrow.
Tay and other people who are upset about the sign say the coffee shop shares the blame with the advertising agency who actually came up with that sign. Just a few days ago, that ad agency posted on its Facebook saying that the sign was, quote, intended to offer a cynical perspective on the rapid development of our Rhino District neighborhood. They say, in hindsight, their sign was, quote, callous, naive, and uninformed. And again, Tom, as for when or if the shop will open again, we are still trying to get that answer, Tom.
Jordan, you said this morning that some people were so upset that even though they want answers, that they didn't want to hear from the City Council President Albus Brooks, who came out there this morning.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly what Councilman Brooks could have said to make these people happy. We were told that he did come out to address the crowd that was out here this morning, the protesters that were here, but they were not happy with what he had to say. They felt they had been ignored all this weekend, and so this was not the time to show up. But they are going to keep making efforts with Councilman Brooks and the rest of the City Council, as well as other local lawmakers, to see what they can do about the issue that's before them.
These are just a few stories of gentrification, a few stories of the evil things white people do when they move into a black neighborhood. I think, what was that neighborhood? Was it Seattle or Portland? I forget which. I forgot this one. Where Trader Joe's. I mean, let's face it. If you want a business with white customers, you want to talk about one, that's Trader Joe's. Every white middle class, middle-aged white chick in America goes to Trader Joe's if they can. Anyway, Trader Joe's, somebody up there in the Pacific Northwest said, hey, Trader Joe's, why don't you do something for the fellas? Why don't you give back to the community? Why don't you build a store here? Trader Joe said, all right, we're a big company. We can toss away a store into the ghetto. Why not? We'll rack it up. We'll get some brownie points somewhere for it. Everybody knows white people are evil. Maybe we can, take the edge off of that. Anyway, so Trader Joe's goes to the city. They get their permits. They buy the land. They're about ready to break ground. All of a sudden, all the fellas and their lovely ladies come out going, no. We don't want white people in this neighborhood. We don't. And by the way, there are already white people moving in. These are 25-something hipsters that are totally surprised when they look out their window and they see a bunch of black people in suits and nice clothes and hats under an awning at the Trader Joe's site. They're listening as their new neighbors are condemning white people moving into that neighborhood. And what they really need at that site is not stuff for white people, but they need some more free stuff for black people, namely public housing. Trader Joe said, okay, great, we'll just go somewhere else. I can still see the pictures on the faces of these white kids, call them kids in their 20s. They're looking around going, hey, what just happened here? What just happened? I don't think I can grok this. I mean, I'm down with the cause. Thus, the cause is down with me. That's a truism. That's obviously true. But those people are saying they don't like white people. And you could see them. You could see them thinking. You could see them registering all this new information. You can see their eyes going back and forth in their head, trying to sift it, filter it, deny it, ignore it, condone it, excuse it, lie about it even to themselves. then I think they just put it down and they just say, okay, I'll figure this out later. I got to go to the farmer's market and pick up some green beans and peppers for my vegan dinner party I'm having tonight for a bunch of white people. Now, if I can just find one black person to invite, that would be great. I'm not exaggerating this. I'm understating it. And the gentrification is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the gentrification by itself. I mean, it's not that big of a deal by itself. But why gentrification is a big deal and anti-gentrification is it really puts on display this respectable level of racial venom, anti-white racial venom, anti-Asian racial venom that is just dripping out of all these respectable black politicians and their white satraps in these big cities, in the small cities, who just are convinced that being white is a crime, just the way it is in South Africa. Let's have a party where we could sing about how we're going to talk about killing white people. All we need are the tires, the necklaces. You bring the tires, I'll bring the gasoline. We'll find some way to burn them, to protest this ridiculous level of white people trying to move into a neighborhood and make it a better place to live. Because when white people go into a black neighborhood, that makes the black kids angry.